JP Morgan just quietly pulled a lever that might rewrite America's next decade. Not a deal, not an investment, but a $1.5 trillion decade-long repositioning move they're calling a Security and Resilience Initiative. But here's the real story. This isn't about fancy corporate language. This is about America admitting a weakness, and one of the biggest banks in the world stepping in before it becomes a national crisis. Jamie Dimon has been warning about one thing for years. The U.S. is far too dependent on foreign supply chains. For the world's leading superpower, that's not an inconvenience. It's a structural risk, and JP Morgan is acting like they're done waiting for someone else to fix it. This initiative targets the pillars of America's survival: defense, aerospace, semiconductors, power grids, critical minerals, water systems, energy, AI, advanced manufacturing. These aren't random categories. These are the exact sectors that broke the moment global pressure increased. When chip shortages shut down auto plants, when ports choked with cargo, when China's mineral dominance exposed America's blind spots, JP Morgan saw something every day in real time. The next global crisis can't be solved with interest rate cuts. It can only be solved with control of infrastructure, technology, and supply lines. And that's where this $1.5 trillion is heading. Not into stocks, not into safer bonds, but into the spine of America's future strength. They've already prepared $10 billion for immediate deployment, targeting companies building chips, energy systems, and next-generation manufacturing. And make no mistake, this isn't charity. Banks don't spend trillions because they feel patriotic. They spend because the world is changing and they want the high ground before everyone else notices the battlefield shifting. The last 5 years proved how fragile global systems really are. A virus stopped world trade. One ship blocked the Suez Canal. Europe struggled through an energy shock. China tightened its grip on mineral processing, and America realized a simple truth. If you don't control your supply chain, you don't control your future. That's the real mission behind this initiative: rebuild domestic capability, recreate industrial strength, prepare for a world that's becoming more chaotic, less cooperative, and brutally competitive. The global order is tilting. Countries are scrambling for energy, minerals, chips, and tech dominance. In that world, the winners will be the nations that secure their essentials. The losers will be the ones that outsource them. JP Morgan understands exactly where this is heading. Semiconductors are the nervous system of the modern world. AI is the brain. Energy is the bloodstream. Minerals are the foundation. Infrastructure is the skeleton that holds everything together. You cannot run a country or compete globally with outdated systems. And right now, much of America's backbone is aging. Power grids are fragile. Manufacturing has thinned out. Mineral supply chains run through foreign competitors. Someone has to rebuild it. And JP Morgan wants to be the institution financing that rebuild. Because governments move slowly. Budgets get stuck in Congress. But banks can move tomorrow morning. And that's why this initiative matters. It is the private sector stepping into a vacuum before the cracks turn into fractures. Jamie Dimon has been warning for years that the world is entering an unpredictable period. Geopolitics is tense, energy markets are unstable, technology is advancing faster than regulation, and supply chains are one disruption away from collapse. This initiative is JP Morgan's answer to all of that. A long-term shield built through capital, not politics. $1.5 trillion, more than the GDP of most countries, more than 2 years of America's defense budget, more than the value of entire multinational firms. When a bank moves money at this scale, they are preparing for something big, something structural, something that will define the next era of global economics. The official language says resilience. But the deeper message is clear. America must rebuild its industrial bases before the next global shock hits. And JP Morgan wants to be the one holding the steering wheel. This isn't about the next quarter or the next election. It's about the next 10 years, possibly the next 20. The world is changing direction. Globalization is slowing, national strategies are rising, economic power is shifting. This initiative is a signal, a warning, and an opportunity. JP Morgan is betting that the future belongs to countries that rebuild, not countries that outsource. And if that bet is right, this may be the most important financial move of the decade. When a bank commits $1.5 trillion, it is not reacting to the present. It is preparing for a future that most people haven't even imagined yet. And JP Morgan's future view is clear. The next decade will not be easy. It will be competitive, unstable, resourced, and defined by nations fighting for control of their own economic lifelines. JP Morgan is positioning itself right in the center of that world. Not as a bank, but as an architect, a builder, a strategic force shaping America's next industrial era. The biggest clue lies in where this money will go. Into companies that secure energy independence, into factories that bring manufacturing back home, into semiconductor plants that reduce reliance on Asia, into mining and processing operations that break China's dominance over critical minerals. This is not a financial trend. It is a national redirection. For years, America outsourced everything because it was cheaper. Cheaper to produce in China, cheaper to refine minerals in Asia, cheaper to depend on foreign shipping. But cheap failed the moment the world hit real stress. Prices exploded, supply chains broke, countries shut borders, and suddenly the world learned a hard truth. Cheap is dangerous. Secured is priceless. JP Morgan is responding to that lesson. They are treating essential industries the same way Wall Street treats blue-chip assets. High value, low tolerance for failure, and absolutely critical for long-term growth. Jamie Dimon has said repeatedly that the world is entering a new geopolitical era. Countries are divided into blocks. Technology is becoming a weapon. Energy is becoming leverage, and supply chains can no longer be trusted. This $1.5 trillion plan is built around those risks. It's a shield, a bet, and a roadmap. A shield against global shocks, a bet that America will reindustrialize, and a roadmap towards sectors that will define economic power. One of the biggest pieces of this shift is minerals. The world cannot build batteries, chips, missiles, satellites, or renewable energy without a stable supply of rare minerals. And right now, China controls the majority of processing. That is an enormous vulnerability. JP Morgan knows it, the US government knows it, industry leaders know it. So where does capital flow next? Into mineral extraction, into processing, into building domestic alternatives, into forming new alliances with countries that can supply what China controls today. Another massive component is semiconductors. The chip shortage didn't just slow production, it exposed a fundamental weakness. Most advanced chips come from Taiwan, a region sitting in the middle of global tension, a region everyone watches nervously. JP Morgan's move signals that America cannot afford this risk anymore. If something happens in Taiwan, the entire global economy breaks. That is why chip investment is becoming non-negotiable, not for profit alone, but for national stability. Energy is another pillar. The last few years proved how fragile energy systems are. Europe learned this the hard way during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. America watched that crisis closely. Energy security is not just an environmental issue, it is an economic survival issue. If the grid weakens, industries collapse. If power prices spike, inflation explodes. So JP Morgan is directing money into energy resilience, modern grids, storage, transmission, clean energy, reliable baseload systems. This is long-term positioning, a bet on the systems that keep a country alive. Now, here's the part no one is talking about. JP Morgan's initiative forces other institutions to move too. When the largest bank in America commits $1.5 trillion, others cannot sit quietly. Competitors will follow, funds will follow, private equity will follow, sovereign investors will follow. This initiative won't just build projects, it will shift the entire direction of American investment. From software back to hardware, from apps back to factories, from speculation back to strategy. And the timing is perfect. Interest rates are high, debt is heavy, growth is slowing, governments don't have the budgets to rebuild infrastructure alone. So JP Morgan steps in not to replace the government, but to power it. This is how a new economic chapter starts, not through speeches, but through money put to work. And behind this move lies a layer that rarely gets talked about openly. If the US steps into a decade-long contest with China, It cannot depend on China for its fundamentals, not for minerals, not for chips, not for manufacturing, not for grid components. In a world like that, self-sufficiency becomes a strategic tool, and JP Morgan is choosing to finance that tool. That's why this initiative is massive. $1.5 trillion isn't a routine investment. It's a planned restructuring, a deliberate shift in where the country's economic strength will be built. Because the world is changing faster than most people notice. A world where technology becomes leverage, where energy defines capability, where supply chains determine the winners, and minerals decide who stays competitive. JP Morgan understands that the coming decade won't revolve around consumer gadgets. It will revolve around industrial strength, national infrastructure, and long-term strategic resilience. This initiative isn't about the next earnings report. It's about the next era. A world with new risks, shifting alliances, sharper competition, and different winners. JP Morgan wants the US on the winning side, and they want to be the institution that financed that outcome. The message behind this initiative is clear. The world is entering a tougher, more competitive, more uncertain stage, and the nations that rebuild their core systems will shape the next half-century. JP Morgan intends to ensure those core systems are rebuilt with their capital. This isn't just investment, it's direction, it's strategy, it's influence.